All right, we're coming in on Monday, and back to the digital art curriculum. We are working on Unit 3, our Introduction to Vector Shapes, and understanding the difference between vectors and the raster pixel-based line art we were doing in Exercise 1. The project we're going to work on is Exercise 2, an emoji shape composition that's based on any theme we want. This demo just carries over the banned book theme. But the idea is we used this site, which is linked in the assignment, to create our very simple kind of customized emoji. And this is just our sketch to kind of build up with. And we talked about how these were vectors, just like typefaces are vectors. But then in order to use it in a raster program like Photopea or Photoshop, we needed to turn it into pixels. So at this step, we have this, and we hopefully have that saved in our folder. So there's two things we always want to do at the beginning of class. The first is we want to go to our Documents folder. And we want to pull out our class folder and bring it onto the desktop. So there's mine. This is the one mine for the afternoon, right? So by pulling that onto the desktop, you have easy access to it. The other thing we want to make sure to do is not be working in full screen mode. Because when you're working in full screen mode with that green circle, you're not able to see anything that's saved to the desktop. You're not easily able to work between things you've downloaded or drag things in or pull things off. So we always want to have it floating. And then because it's Monday, it's always good to check in with our course outline, which you all have printed out, right? So we could always just look at it that way, but remember it's digital as well. We can see it right from the home page. And to check in with what we're responsible for today. So we're in February now. We are turning in Exercise 2, just like we did Exercise 1 last class. We are going to be introduced to Question of the Day 1 as part of Unit 4, which is about digital art versus traditional art. And to get credit for that, you need to answer with more than 100 words. A few of those have been started, but we'll start that project today, and then we'll discuss it over the next two classes. And then we're going to get introduced to our first assignment, which is a 3-point project, which is a composite from at least 5 different image sources of a fantasy landscape. This is concept design, setting design. The difference between exercises, which are worth 2 points, and assignments, which are worth 3 points, is this is the rubric for assignments. Assignments, you can't miss the deadline and get any points for it. So always good when we get introduced to an assignment to look and see when that assignment is due. So that assignment's going to be due on February 10th, a week from today. And if you turn nothing in by that deadline, you get a 0 and you can't resubmit. But if you turn anything in by that deadline, even if it doesn't meet the requirements, even if it's just the sketch, just showing that you've gotten started at it, then you'll get 1 out of 3 points, and you can still turn something in by the end of the semester for higher credit. 2 points shows that you meet the requirements. That's what you get for an exercise, right? You've turned it in, you've met all the requirements. But for an assignment, just meeting the bare requirements doesn't mean it's the best you can make it, right? It's not a portfolio piece for you quite yet, if there are obvious things that can be improved. And I'll write that in the comments and help you with it. But if you turn in something that meets all the requirements and, as I say, engages the viewer as art. So it means you're really trying as the creator to sand and round out all the rough edges, make everything kind of work as strongly as you are able to with your current skill. Then you can get 3 out of 3 points on it. Right? And it might be a portfolio piece that we print for later in the class. So that is our general assignment grading rubric. I try to keep it pretty objective, right? So it's not based on my taste or trying to cater to my taste. It's about making it a fully finished project in your eyes, right? And if there's clear improvements that can be made that you agree with, you make those, you can always earn the 3 points. All right, but moving forward with exercise 2, we worked on it a little bit last class. We just got it started, so I have a folder. It's nice to have these things organized. We opened up the SVG, which you don't need to do. I showed you that in Illustrator just to show you that these are vectors. But then we are going to be working from, I don't want to use beta. Sorry. I get lazy and I double click. We're going to use Photoshop 2025. Beta is their testing shell. But what we're going to be doing today is replacing all of those raster pixels with our own vector shapes. And these are different than the line art layers that we got from other people's pixels in the last project, because these vector shapes are always going to have perfectly clean edges, no matter how many pixels we force them into. So the requirement of this is that your entire emoji, and you can make as many changes to the original kind of sketch of the emoji you like, but the entire emoji needs to be made of only vector shapes. How do we know they're vector shape layers? They have that little square with the anchors in the corners in the corner of the layer window. And if you try to do something like erase them, it won't let you. It will make you rasterize them. You don't want to rasterize them. None of your vector shapes should ever be rasterized for this, because that takes all the vector attributes out of them. So, we're at this stage. Remember, when we open a new project, especially when we're just getting started at it and we haven't looked at it in a while, you want to go to image size. And we want to make sure that it's at least 8 by 10 pixels by at least 300 so that it is print resolution. Right? That is our standard minimum. Mine is. And if you want to see the rulers in Photoshop, like you can see my inch rulers here, you can hit Command R and you'll turn those on. It will remember that. And then if it's not in inches, if instead it's in pixels, you're going to go to Photoshop and you're going to go to Settings and you're going to go to Units and Rulers. And you only have to set this once, but you want to change your rulers to express themselves in inches rather than in pixels, because that helps with our physical dimensions. You don't need to worry about anything else. All right, so this is where we left off. We have our kind of guiding image. I'm going to turn this into a fox for Aesop's Fables, right? And then we started building shapes using the vector shape tool, which they're down by the bottom. So I did an ellipse, and I dragged it and made a shape, right? Notice each time you do that, it will automatically make a new vector shape layer. How do you change the color of it? You double click on the layer preview and you get to a color selector. Right. And this is going to be a fox's ear. So let's just use the color of the monkey's ear here. And so instead of needing to use the color selector, I can also, whenever it's the color picker, I can go to any image that's open in Photoshop, and you'll see how the cursor turns into what's called the eyedropper tool, and it will automatically select the color that I click on, whether it's the pink, the yellow, or that ear color. Okay, now that's floating on top of everything else, just like cutouts of paper, right? So now I have these 3 oval cutouts. But now instead of just transforming it like this, right, what I can do is I can also Command T, which is Edit, Free Transform, right? And I can right click inside it and I can warp it, just like we were with our line art. This will give us more practice. So if I want to turn it into something that looks more like a fox's ear, I might pinch it off at the corner there. I might push it up a little bit. Might round it out here. There we go. And then I hit return. And as long as it stays a vector path, you're good, even though I had to create more anchor points for that. Now when I use the move tool, I can place it where I want. And then if I want to move it behind the other layers, I just drag it down like they're stacks of paper. Drag and drop. And now you see it's behind that one, in front of that one. Maybe I want it behind both. I can do that. So if we look at these closely now, you can see that not only are they filled, because strokes have two attributes, not strokes, vector shapes have two attributes. They have a fill color, which is this color inside, and then they have what's called a stroke attribute, which is like the outline around it. And remember, they're vectors, so no matter how big I make the image size, this will always be perfectly clean. Right now, it's just expressed as 8 by 10 by 300 pixels per inch, which is why you see pixels, but they'll infinitely scale whenever I want. Now, you can see those attributes by clicking on Properties when you have the layer selected. So you can see the properties up above your layers, and just scroll on your properties. And you'll see the fill and the stroke. This stroke we are going to turn into an empty, so we don't want those outlines. So you can see, I'll zoom in on this one. That's the one I'm selecting. If I turn the stroke on, it will have an outline. If I say empty, which is like a red crossbar, like no smoking, right? That means there's no stroke attribute. We do not want to have any stroke attributes on this, on our emoji. Emojis don't usually have stroke attributes because they're made to be really small, right? And strokes will scale up with the image. So it's a little too detailed for us. We don't need them. Now let's go to this one and fix that stroke property. Turn it off. And now if we look at this one, it doesn't give me that because it turned it into a shape path after I transformed it. So instead of using it that way, it's still a vector path, but it's one where I no longer have easy control of the properties. I am going to simply make another one. And before I warp it, I'm going to make sure that the stroke is turned off. The nice thing about these properties is once you select one and you make a new shape layer, it will remember all the settings you did for the last one. It will fill it with the same color you last made. It will have the same stroke attribute. So I just want to make sure before you build too many that you turn all your stroke attributes off. And now I can transform it, like free transform the path. I can warp it. Notice that the stroke is turned off, but as soon as I warp it, because it has to create more anchor points, I lose the ability to easily change the stroke property. So I'll turn this into a fox's ear, a more complex shape. Then hit return. And I'm going to say don't show again, because a regular path is still a vector shape. It's just not one that's a default vector shape that initially got built, right? So this gives me multiple anchor points. So it's a way of customizing your vector shape. Then if I want to move it behind, I simply drag and drop it. And now I don't have any of those outlines around it. All right. Now, the other nice thing about vector paths and vector shapes is that when you select that layer, it will outline it for you and kind of show you which edge you're on, especially if you're going to transform it, Command T. So even though this is underneath the other two layers, when I transform it, it shows me a little blue edge around the whole thing, like X-ray vision. Now the problem is, I'm trying to turn this monkey in the background and create those shapes, but I can't see the monkey very quickly after I put big cutouts of paper on top of it. So we're going to do a technique that we're going to learn quite a bit in this class, and it's called onion skinning, right? So this is a design and animation technique. I'm going to duplicate my bottom layer, that screen grab. And how do I duplicate something? There's a 2-key shortcut. We learned it last class. Command J, very good, both in Photopea and Photoshop. So I Command J, make a copy. Now I'm going to make this copy on top of everything else. So before I've made too many vector shapes, I'm putting it at the top, making a sandwich. Now to onion skin means to make it really thin and transparent. So I'm going to take the opacity of that copy that's on top of everything and turn it into tracing paper. Take it to like 20%.